This happened 2 summers ago, and I still get chills thinking about it. My friend Marcus had gotten us tickets to this massive 4th of July festival in upstate New York. Not just any festival either. This was one of those premium events where they shut down an entire lakefront area and bring in food trucks, live bands, and what they promised would be the best fireworks display on the East Coast. Marcus and I have been friends since college. We both work demanding jobs in the city, so when he suggested we take a long weekend to decompress at this festival, I jumped at the chance. The plan was simple: drive up Friday afternoon, camp at the nearby state park, and spend the weekend eating too much barbecue and watching fireworks like we were kids again. The festival grounds were impressive. They had transformed this massive field overlooking the lake into something that looked like a cross between a county fair and a music festival. The main stage sat right at the water's edge, with rows of vendors and activities stretching back toward the parking area. By the time we arrived Friday evening, the place was already packed with families setting up blankets and groups of college kids claiming prime spots near the stage. Marcus had splurged on VIP wristbands, which gave us access to a roped-off area with better views and shorter lines for food and drinks. We spent Friday night checking out the different bands and getting our bearings. The whole setup felt safe and well-organized. Security guards were everywhere, and there was even a small medical tent set up near the main entrance. Saturday was when things started getting interesting. The day lineup featured bigger acts, and by evening the crowd had easily doubled in size. Marcus and I had spent most of the day drinking beer and eating our weight in festival food. So, by the time the sun started setting, we were both feeling pretty good. That was when we met them. We were standing near the VIP bar, waiting for the headlining band to start, when these two women approached us. They introduced themselves as Sarah and Beth, and said they had driven up from Connecticut for the weekend. Both were probably in their late 20s, well-dressed in that casual but expensive way that suggested they had money. Sarah had short blonde hair and was wearing a vintage band t-shirt that probably cost more than my rent. Beth was taller, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, and she kept checking her phone like she was expecting important calls. What struck me immediately was how confident they seemed. Not just socially confident, but like they belonged wherever they happened to be standing. When they asked if we wanted to join them for the fireworks show, Marcus and I exchanged glances and agreed without much thought. The four of us found a spot on the grass closer to the lake, away from the main crowd. Sarah had brought a blanket, and Beth produced a cooler that seemed much larger than what two people would need for a weekend festival. She offered us drinks, some kind of craft beer I had never heard of, served in bottles with no labels. Local brewery, she explained when I asked about it. My friend owns it. They're still working on the branding. The beer was actually really good. It had this smooth, almost sweet finish that made it go down easy. Too easy, as it turned out. By the time the fireworks started, I had probably had 3 or 4 of them, and I was feeling more drunk than I should have been given what I had consumed throughout the day. The fireworks display was incredible. For 20 minutes, the sky above the lake exploded in colors and patterns that reflected off the water like something out of a movie. Sarah and Beth seemed to know exactly when the best parts were coming, pointing out shells and effects before they happened. They clearly had been to shows like this before. As the finale began, this massive cascade of gold and silver that lit up the entire lake, I started feeling strange. Not just drunk strange, but like my body was disconnecting from my brain. My vision started getting fuzzy around the edges, and when I tried to say something to Marcus about it, my words came out slurred and delayed. I looked over at Marcus and could see he was experiencing something similar. His eyes had this glazed, unfocused look, and when Sarah asked him a question about where we were staying, he answered in this slow, mechanical way that did not sound like him at all. "I think we should head back to our campsite," I managed to say, but Beth immediately suggested we come back to their hotel instead. "We have a suite at the resort," she said, much more comfortable than sleeping in tents. The next part is where my memory starts getting spotty. I remember agreeing to go with them, even though every instinct I had was telling me something was wrong. I remember walking through the festival grounds as they were shutting down for the night, passing security guards who nodded at Sarah and Beth like they knew them. I remember getting into a car, a black SUV with tinted windows, but I could not tell you who was driving or where we went. What I remember next is fragments, sitting in what might have been a hotel room, but the furniture looked too expensive and the view out the window was wrong. There were other people there, adults I did not recognize, having conversations I could not follow. Someone giving me water and telling me to drink it. Someone else asking me questions about my job, my family, where I lived. The strangest part was that I answered everything. Even though part of my brain was screaming that something was very wrong, I could not stop myself from responding to whatever they asked. It was like being a passenger in my own body, watching myself have conversations I did not want to be having with people I did not trust. After that, nothing. Complete blackness until I woke up. I came to in a hospital bed with no memory of how I had gotten there. The first thing I noticed was that I was wearing a hospital gown, but underneath it I had on clothes that were not mine. A t-shirt that was too big and jeans that were too short. The second thing I noticed was that Marcus was in the bed next to me, looking just as confused as I felt. A nurse came in when she saw we were both awake and explained that we had been brought in early Sunday morning by ambulance. Someone had called 911 after finding us unconscious in the parking lot of a gas station about 30 miles from the festival grounds. We had both been checked for injuries and given blood tests, but aside from being severely dehydrated and having some kind of sedative in our systems, we appeared to be fine. "Do you remember what happened?" she asked. Neither of us could give her a clear answer. The last thing Marcus remembered was the fireworks show. For me, it was agreeing to go back to Sarah and Beth's hotel, but everything after that was a complete blank. The police came by later that afternoon to take our statements. They seemed professional enough, but I could tell they were skeptical of our story. Two guys in their 30s found unconscious at a gas station after a festival weekend, with no clear memory of how they got there. It probably sounded like a typical case of partying too hard and making bad decisions. When we told them about Sarah and Beth and the drinks they had given us, one of the officers asked if we had gotten their last names or contact information. Of course we had not. When we described the black SUV, they asked if we had noticed the license plate. We had not. When we mentioned the hotel suite, they asked which resort. We had no idea. "Look," the older officer said, "I am not saying nothing happened to you guys, but festival weekends bring out all kinds of people, looking to take advantage of folks who have had too much to drink. Best case scenario, some girls slipped you something to rob you, but when they saw you were too out of it, they got scared and dumped you somewhere safe." "But nothing was missing," Marcus pointed out. "Our wallets, our phones, our car keys. We still had everything." The officer shrugged. "Maybe they got spooked before they could take anything. Or maybe you guys just had more to drink than you realized and wandered off. Happens more than you would think." They took down our information and said they would look into it, but I could tell they were not planning to spend much time on our case. Two grown men who could not remember a night of drinking at a festival was not exactly a high priority. The hospital released us later that evening, and we drove back to the campground to collect our stuff. Our tent was still there, untouched, with all our camping gear exactly as we had left it. It was like we had vanished for an entire day and night, without anyone noticing we were gone. The drive back to the city was mostly silent. Both Marcus and I kept trying to piece together what had happened, but there were just too many gaps. How had we gotten 30 miles away from the festival grounds? Who had changed our clothes? Why had someone bothered to call an ambulance instead of just leaving us wherever we were? The more I thought about it, the more disturbed I became. Someone had clearly drugged us, but for what purpose? If they had wanted to rob us, they had plenty of opportunity. If they had wanted to hurt us, they could have done that too. Instead, we had been kept somewhere for over 12 hours, then deposited safely where someone would find us and get us help. It was like we had been borrowed for some purpose we could not understand, then returned when that purpose was complete. Over the next few weeks, I found myself obsessing over the details. I searched online for any news about the festival, looking for reports of other people going missing or being drugged. I found nothing. I tried to find information about the local brewery Beth had mentioned, but every search came up empty. I even called the festival organizers to ask if they had any record of incidents that weekend, but they told me everything had gone smoothly. Marcus was less obsessed with finding answers, but I could tell the experience had shaken him too. He started declining invitations to festivals and concerts, saying he was too busy with work. When we did hang out, he avoided talking about that weekend, changing the subject whenever I brought it up. About a month later, I decided to drive back to the festival grounds on my own. I told myself I was just curious, that maybe seeing the place in daylight would help me remember something. But really, I think I was hoping to find some evidence that what had happened to us was real and not just some alcohol-induced shared delusion. The festival area was completely back to normal. Just an empty field overlooking a lake, with no sign that thousands of people had been there a few weeks earlier. I walked around the perimeter, trying to remember exactly where we had been sitting when we met Sarah and Beth, but it all looked different without the stages and vendor booths. I was about to leave when I noticed something near the tree line at the edge of the field. Partially buried under some fallen leaves was a beer bottle. As I picked it up, I realized it was the same unlabeled craft beer that Beth had given us that night. The bottle was empty, but there was still a faint residue at the bottom that looked darker than normal beer. I took the bottle with me and drove to the nearest police station. I explained who I was and showed them the bottle, asking if they could test it for whatever drug Sarah and Beth had given us. The desk sergeant listened politely, then told me that unless I had evidence of a crime being committed, they could not run tests on random bottles I found in the woods. Besides, he added, even if there was something in there, it would not prove anything about what happened to you. Could have been anyone's bottle. He was right, of course, but I was frustrated by how dismissive everyone seemed to be. It was like the whole experience had been erased, leaving Marcus and me with nothing but our own confused memories and a growing sense that we had been involved in something much bigger than a simple drugging. I kept the bottle anyway, storing it in my freezer like some kind of evidence for a crime that no one believed had been committed. Sometimes I would take it out and look at it, wondering what had really been in there and what had happened to us during those missing hours. The worst part was not knowing whether we had been victims or participants. Had Sarah and Beth targeted us specifically, or were we just convenient? Had we been chosen randomly, or was there something about us that made us suitable for whatever they had planned? The fact that we had been returned safely suggested we had not been in serious danger, but it also meant that whatever had been done to us had been completed successfully. I started having trouble sleeping, not just insomnia, but a fear of losing consciousness, of not being in control of my own mind. I would lie awake wondering if whatever had been done to us was permanent, if there were things planted in our memories or taken from them that we would never know about. Marcus seemed to bounce back more quickly than I did, but I noticed changes in him too. He became more cautious about social situations, especially around people we did not know well. He stopped drinking at parties and always insisted on getting his own drinks from the bar. When I asked him about it, he would just say he was being more careful, but I could see the same wariness in his eyes that I felt every time someone offered me something to drink or eat. 6 months later, I got a call from a detective in a different county. He said they were investigating a series of incidents involving people who had attended various festivals and events over the past year. Multiple reports of memory loss, missing time, and waking up in unfamiliar locations. He wanted to know if Marcus and I would be willing to come in and give more detailed statements about our experience. We met with the detective the following week. His name was Thompson, and he had been tracking these cases for months. According to him, there had been at least a dozen similar incidents across 3 different states, all following the same basic pattern. People would attend some kind of public event, meet friendly strangers who offered them drinks, then lose several hours of memory before waking up somewhere else. The strange thing, Detective Thompson told us, is that none of the victims were robbed or physically harmed. In most cases, they were found somewhere safe, sometimes even in better condition than when they disappeared. But they all report the same feeling of having lost time and not knowing what happened to them. He showed us photos of some of the other victims. All were adults in their 20s and 30s, both men and women, from various backgrounds and professions. The only thing they seemed to have in common was that they had all been healthy, social people who were comfortable in crowd situations. "Do you have any theories about what might be happening?" Marcus asked. Detective Thompson hesitated before answering. "There are a few possibilities we are exploring. Could be some kind of research study being conducted without proper consent. Could be a group testing new drugs or techniques for controlling behavior. Could even be something involving human trafficking, though the fact that victims are returned safely makes that less likely." He asked us detailed questions about Sarah and Beth, about the car we had gotten into, about anything we could remember from the missing hours. I mentioned the beer bottle I had found and asked if he wanted to test it, but he said too much time had passed for any meaningful results. The problem, he explained, is that these people seem to know exactly how to avoid leaving evidence. They target victims at crowded events where there are thousands of potential witnesses, but somehow no one ever remembers seeing anything suspicious. They use vehicles and locations that cannot be traced, and whatever they are doing to people's memories is sophisticated enough that victims cannot provide useful descriptions or details. As we were leaving, Detective Thompson gave us his card and asked us to call if we remembered anything else, no matter how insignificant it seemed. He also warned us to be careful at future public events. "I do not want to make you paranoid," he said, "but there is a possibility that whoever did this to you might try to contact you again. If they were conducting some kind of experiment or study, they might want to follow up with previous subjects." That thought had never occurred to me, and it added a whole new layer of anxiety to an already disturbing situation. For weeks afterward, I found myself looking over my shoulder at festivals, concerts, even grocery stores, wondering if Sarah and Beth might appear again with their friendly smiles and unlabeled drinks. It has been 2 years now, and I still have no answers. Detective Thompson calls occasionally with updates, but the investigation has not made much progress. More incidents continue to be reported, but the perpetrators remain as elusive as ever. Marcus and I still talk about that weekend sometimes, but mostly we try to avoid the subject. The hardest part is the uncertainty, not knowing what was done to us during those missing hours, or why, or whether it might happen again. Sometimes I wonder if I am supposed to remember something, if there is some kind of trigger or signal I'm supposed to recognize that would bring back those lost memories. Other times, I wonder if forgetting is actually a mercy, and that whatever happened was too disturbing for my mind to hold on to. I do not go to festivals anymore. I know that probably sounds like letting them win, whoever they are, but I cannot shake the feeling that showing up at another crowded event would be like putting myself back on their radar. Marcus has made similar changes to his social life, though we have never explicitly discussed the connection. The beer bottle is still in my freezer. I know it is probably meaningless at this point, but I cannot bring myself to throw it away. It is the only physical evidence I have that any of this really happened. The only proof that Marcus and I did not just imagine the whole thing. Sometimes I take it out and look at it, wondering what was really in there and what it unlocked in our minds. I think about Sarah and Beth, about their confident smiles and expensive clothes and the way they seemed to know exactly what was going to happen before it did. I wonder if they were the ones conducting whatever was done to us, or if they were just recruiters working for someone else. But mostly, I try not to think about it at all, because the more I consider the possibilities, the more convinced I become that what happened to us was not random. We were chosen for something, used for something, and then set free with our memories wiped clean. And somewhere out there, the people responsible are still operating, still selecting new victims from crowds of unsuspecting festival goers. I just hope that whatever they got from us was enough, and that Marcus and I will never see those friendly faces again. Because next time, I have a feeling we might not be lucky enough to wake up in a hospital bed. My name is Marcus, and I live about 40 minutes outside of Nashville, Tennessee. Last 4th of July, I drove up to my cousin Danny's place in Kentucky for their annual barbecue and fireworks show. Danny lives on this old farm property that his grandfather left him, complete with a big field perfect for launching fireworks and enough space for the whole extended family to spread out. It was exactly the kind of night you hope for on the 4th. Clear skies, good food, and enough illegal fireworks to make the neighbors 3 counties over wonder what was happening. The kids ran around with those little sparklers, while the adults told the same stories they tell every year. I stayed later than I planned, which turned out to be a mistake I still think about. By the time I said my goodbyes and loaded up my truck, it was nearly midnight. The drive home would take me through some of the most remote parts of rural Kentucky and Tennessee. These are the kinds of roads where you might see one other car every 20 minutes, and half the time there are no streetlights for miles at a stretch. The first hour went by without incident. I had the radio playing softly, some late-night talk show that was discussing conspiracy theories about government surveillance. I was tired but alert enough, and the night air coming through my slightly cracked windows felt good after being around the fire all evening. That was when I started noticing the light, At first, I thought it was just another car behind me, but something about it seemed off. The light was too bright, too focused, like a spotlight rather than regular headlights. When I checked my rearview mirror, I could not make out the shape of a vehicle at all, just this intensely bright white light that seemed to be following me at a consistent distance. I slowed down to see if whoever it was would pass me. The light slowed down too. I sped up about 10 miles per hour above the limit. The light matched my speed exactly, maintaining the same distance behind me. That was when I started to feel genuinely uncomfortable. On these kinds of roads, people usually either pass you quickly or fall way behind. No one just follows at the exact same speed for miles on end. I tried to get a better look in my mirror, but the light was so bright that I could not see anything else. It was like staring into the sun. I decided to test whatever was behind me. There was a small side road coming up, one of those gravel paths that leads to a single house set way back in the woods. I took the turn without signaling, making it as sudden as possible. If this was just another driver heading in the same direction, they would continue straight on the main road. The light turned with me. My heart started beating faster. There was absolutely no reason for anyone to follow me down this random side road, unless they were deliberately tracking me. I drove about a quarter-mile down the gravel path before turning around in someone's driveway and heading back to the main road. The whole time, that light stayed exactly where it was, following my every move. When I got back to the main road, I floored it. My truck is not exactly built for speed, but I pushed it as hard as I could. The speedometer crept up to 85, which was probably dangerous on those winding roads, but I was starting to panic. The light kept pace with me effortlessly, as if my speed meant nothing at all. That was when I realized something that made my blood run cold. I had been driving for almost 15 minutes since I first noticed the light, and I had not heard a single engine sound other than my own. No matter how fast or slow I went, there was no sound of another vehicle. Just that silent, bright light following me through the darkness. I pulled out my phone to call 911, but I had no signal. I was in one of those dead zones that dot the rural highways, where cell towers are few and far between. I felt completely cut off from the world, alone on this empty road with whatever was behind me. The fuel gauge showed I had about a quarter tank left, which should have been plenty to get home under normal circumstances. But I had been driving erratically, speeding up and slowing down, taking unnecessary turns. I was burning gas faster than usual, and there were no gas stations for at least 30 miles in any direction. I tried to think rationally about what could be following me. Maybe it was some kind of emergency vehicle with unusual lights. Maybe it was a broken-down car with jury-rigged headlights. But none of those explanations accounted for the complete silence or the way it perfectly matched my every movement. As I crested a small hill, I saw something that gave me hope. There was a truck stop about 2 miles ahead, one of those big travel centers that stay open all night for long-haul drivers. I could see the glow of their sign cutting through the darkness, and I had never been so relieved to see commercial lighting in my life. I took the exit ramp faster than I should have and pulled into the parking lot. I parked directly under one of the brightest lights I could find, right next to the main entrance. As soon as I stopped, I looked in my rearview mirror to see what had been following me. There was nothing there. The parking lot behind me was completely empty. No car, no truck, no light of any kind. Just empty asphalt stretching back to the highway. Whatever had been following me for the past 20 minutes had simply vanished. I sat in my truck for several minutes, trying to process what had just happened. I felt foolish and relieved at the same time. Maybe I had imagined the whole thing. Maybe I was more tired than I thought, or maybe the stress of driving alone at night had played tricks on my mind. I went inside the truck stop and bought a coffee, more for the human interaction than because I needed caffeine. The clerk was a friendly older woman who asked how my 4th of July had been. I almost told her about what had happened, but I decided against it. What would I say? That a mysterious light had followed me down empty highways? It sounded crazy even to me. The drive home was uneventful. No lights, no followers, nothing unusual at all. I made it back to my house around 2 in the morning and went straight to bed, convinced that I had overreacted to what was probably just another driver who happened to be going in the same direction. 2 weeks later, I was scrolling through local news online when I came across an article that made me freeze. The headline read, "Multiple drivers report strange lights on rural highways." The article described several incidents over the past month where Drivers had reported being followed by inexplicably bright lights that appeared and disappeared without explanation. One driver described the light as too bright to look at directly and noted that it made no sound. Another said the light had followed them for over an hour before vanishing completely when they reached a populated area. The incidents had all occurred on remote highways in Kentucky and Tennessee, in the same general area where I had my encounter. The article mentioned that local police had increased patrols, but had not been able to find any explanation for the reports. Some officials suggested that the sightings might be related to military aircraft or experimental vehicles, but no agency had claimed responsibility. Reading those accounts, I knew I had not imagined what happened to me that night. Other people had experienced the same thing, the same impossible light that followed without sound and disappeared without trace. Whatever it was, I was not the only one who had encountered it. I never reported my own experience to the police. By the time I read the article, 2 weeks had passed, and I was not sure what additional information I could provide. But I have not driven those rural highways alone at night since then, and I do not plan to anytime soon. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had not made it to that truck stop, if I had run out of gas or broken down on one of those empty stretches of road. I try not to think about it too much, but on nights when I cannot sleep, the memory of that silent, brilliant light following me through the darkness comes back as clear as if it happened yesterday. I still do not know what I encountered that 4th of July night, and part of me hopes I never find out.